Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and this is Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com, streaming live educational and civic engagement on the internet and also Oceanic Channel 16. Our show today is titled Solving the Electric Vehicle Charging Dilemma. Greenhouse gas emissions are responsible for global warming are increasing most rapidly in the transportation sector. In order to do our part to lower emissions in Hawaii, many of us have switched to driving 100% electric vehicles. While EV ranges have increased, there's still a need for charging stations everywhere. Finding an unoccupied and working charging station on Oahu is often a challenge. There are 450 charging stations in Hawaii, which means there's approximately one charging station for every 11 cars. This is a pretty high ratio. So why is it so difficult to find an available charging station? All the studies about electric vehicle adoption point up the availability of public charging stations as a major barrier to expanding their use. Here to help us solve this dilemma is Margaret Larson. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you.
Margaret is in the transportation program at DBED. Thank you. And you're also on 3 different transportation working groups.
I am.
Tell me what those are again.
So I work for the Hawaii State Energy Office at DBED, and I help to manage their clean transportation program. I have served as the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative Transportation Working Group co-chair in the past, and now am a member of the Honolulu Clean Cities, as well as the Department of Transportation's Sustainable Transportation Forum here locally, as well as the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum's Transportation Working Group.
So, Margaret, you are the guru of transportation issues for the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, as the person that everybody comes to.
I'm definitely a person that everybody comes to, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, hopefully by the end, we'll have a lot more people coming to you to solve some of these issues. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I get a lot of phone calls.
Great, terrific. Yeah. Well, it sounds like that's a really high ratio, one charging station for every 11 cars.
Yeah.
Yet, I am a Nissan Leaf owner, and I drive all over the island, and it's really frustrating because even when you finally find an available stall, they're often broken. But finding the unoccupied stall is the big golden coin. It's the leprechaun's treasure. So why is that such a difficulty, given the fact that we do seem to have enough chargers for the number of vehicles in the state?
Do you feel like the stall is being occupied by an electric vehicle charging more often than the charging station being broken?
I think it's a 2-prong, actually 3-prong issue. One is the charging station will be broken and can be broken for over a month at a time.
Right.
2 is that there is a car that parks there and stays there all day beyond its charging time. So I think a lot of people have taken advantage of the free parking in the charging stalls, particularly downtown, and they use it as free parking downtown all day. So that's a really unfortunate thing, and that's a behavior modification we could talk about. But the third is, yes, there are often Toyota Ram trucks or non-electric vehicles parked there, and there doesn't seem to be any oversight or regulation of the privilege of parking in the EV stalls.
Sure, so I guess to address those 3, the first being broken charging stations, I think one of the challenges may be that we are remote out here in Hawaii, and a lot of the charging industry and the network industry is located on the mainland. Although we do have electrical contractors and manufacturer representatives that may be local, a lot of the individuals and representatives that I work with in the sector do seem to come and go, live in Hawaii half-time and travel to the mainland or not. So I think it's a servicing issue in terms of charging station representatives here locally that they can service, and also parts. It takes a while to get those parts to be shipped out. I've seen both of those challenges.
So it sounds like the charging companies, the station companies, have not made the commitment to Hawaii that we need.
Some have more than others, for sure. And we continue to see more interest by charging manufacturers as well as network providers as more opportunities become available to them. For instance, Hawaiian Electric has been quickly installing fast chargers across the state.
Right, their brand new chargers are where now? So everyone knows that just came up.
I know they have 5, and I did go to their the last week's unveiling or ribbon cutting or whatnot of their fast charging station, and that one is downtown Honolulu off of Ward at their base yard in their parking lot. I think they have one in Kapolei area. They have one in Hawaii Kai. One at the Dole Plantation, kind of on your way to the North Shore.
That's a brand new one as well.
All of them are relatively brand new in the last year. And then the one at Ward, and I don't know where their 5th one is. I'm not sure. I can't remember where that one is.
And for our audience sake, the fast chargers take how long?
Depends on the vehicle and depends on kind of every little nuances. However, you can get to a pretty decent charge even within like 7 to 10 minutes. But I think to get a full charge, it's usually about 20 minutes to a half hour. But I was going to mention that with that partnership, they've been encouraging new partnerships with charging station manufacturers and network operators. So Green Lots, for instance, was in town. And I sat down with them later that day and asked them about their interest in doing more projects out here. And so I think as more partnerships occur and more programs are rolled out in Hawaii, I think there may be more interest by charging manufacturers to kind of set roots here in Hawaii. We do have an industry here, and it is continuing to, it's not stagnant necessarily. It's just that as more EVs roll out across the nation, there's a need for charging stations everywhere. And so the market, I think, is still kind of relatively new. I mean, it's been around for a few years now, but it's not as great as like the solar industry, for example. So
I'm curious, has there been any development of charging stations as a subsidiary, for example, of the actual EV industry itself, or are they all independent?
I know that Nissan brands charging stations. I believe that the actual hardware is probably not Nissan's. I don't think they're manufacturing charging stations themselves, but I know that they do kind of sell charging stations. In terms of other car manufacturers putting stations out, Tesla has them, but I think those are the only 2 that I know of that are actually selling, if that was your question.
Yeah. And how many utilities are actually investing in charging companies, and was the Hawaiian Electric one with a specific charging contractor?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a growing trend of having utilities get involved in having electric vehicle programs, partially because it's been a challenge to install them. There's a lot of, and we'll kind of go into some of those challenges. And so there's a lot of utilities on the mainland who have recently gotten the okay from their respective PUCs to start installing charging stations. The San Diego Gas and Electric, as well as PG&E in California, are both working on aggressive plans to install charging stations, both in multi-unit dwellings, which we will probably talk about later today, as well as workplaces and kind of the areas of more need. I don't know if you want to go through your other questions.
Let's talk now about the second issue, which is oversight of the misuse or abuse of the EV charging stalls. What's happening to correct that?
Yeah, so that one primarily comes into play for the charging stations are, for the most part, placed and owned and managed by different site hosts. So if you own your mom and pop store and you put in a charging station, you own that and you have directive over whatever you want to do with that charging station. So it's really up to the owner to decide on what they're doing. How you can help to move EVs in and out of that stall so you don't have someone sitting there all day long is really through the use of pricing. That may be one way of doing it. So you price it right for that first couple hours or an hour or whatnot, and then you can kind of bump it up to encourage them to move on. Yeah, I've seen that. There's a few different networks, which is kind of like software in terms of the charging industry world. So you'll have a manufacturer that kind of has the hardware and the actual charging station machine, and then oftentimes they'll have a network attached to that, where the network will kind of handle all those like bells and whistles, and the software side, like reservations, for instance, some of them have the capability of doing, which works really well in a shared charging station capacity, or they have the option to do different dynamic pricings, which work really well with time of use rates as well.
What about with the municipal lots?
Municipal lots, then those are owned by counties or states, so
Right.
then it would be up to, again, the owner of those charging stations to determine what would be best. So, you know, I'd imagine for the state ones that we have, like for instance at the Capitol, there's, I think I'm not sure if it's per hour at that one.
Actually, the Capitol has put in the pricing
Yeah,
mechanism
we
where you're
do.
now paying for it.
Yeah.
Right.
I
but
think
I'm-
they put that one in pretty early on with the credit card swipe, and I believe it's per hour for use. I don't,
Yes, it
yeah,
is.
not per session.
Right,
So that's another way of
and
doing
that
it.
actually is a better managed site, so I think you're
Right.
right, the pricing mechanism helps.
Right.
But what about all the city and county sites? Is there a counterpart that you work with the city and county? And do they have any solutions to getting people not to abuse the site?
Well, I can't really speak to the county on kind of what their plans are going forward, but I do know that they were a partner of ours when we rolled out the Hawaii EV Ready grant and rebate program, and they installed some charging stations at that time. I don't know of any future plans that they have in terms of installing charging stations or adding in pricing or whatnot. I do check in with them on occasion to make sure I have an updated list of their parking lots. A lot of people call me wanting to know which parking lots that they can park in or not.
And what about the free parking program? I know that's been going on now for a couple of years. Is there an end date to it for EV vehicles in state and county lots?
Yeah, the free parking actually went in back in the 90s when the EV Ready program for Hawaii really rolled out, and so
It was that early.
Yeah, so
I
the
didn't
leaders back in the 90s really saw, even back then, that EVs really made sense here in Hawaii. And actually, I think the first car in Hawaii was an electric vehicle, going way back. But you know, when the second,
right.
I guess, the second wave of EVs back in the 90s. So there was progressive legislation back then that really helped us pave our way for when the vehicle came out in 2011 or whatnot. And so that legislation has free parking attached to it, as well as access to HOV lanes with a single passenger, as long as you have that electric plate.
So there's no sunset
There
right
is
now
a
for that?
sunset, yeah, they added a sunset a couple years ago, and I think it's to 2020.
Okay.
And every year it kind of comes up in legislation pertaining to, sometimes it's kind of like they find EV drivers abusing the spirit of the law, where they'll move from one stall to the next stall to kind of continue to gain that extra.
Very creative users.
Yeah, so
and abusers.
we've been working with our the state agency that manages the parking lots here, DAGS, to kind of figure out what would make sense in terms of managing that.
We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, I want to hear what some of those solutions might be. We'll be right back with Sustainable Hawaii.
Here's the deal. I'm Jay Fidel. I'm the host of Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, which is the Energy Policy Forum's program on Wednesday. That's how we call Wednesday Energy Wednesday. We call it Energy Wednesday every Wednesday. Are you surprised? Okay, and we get guys like Jim Alberts here from Hawaiian Electric who can tell us what's really going on in energy. We want to be informed. It's so important. It's the most important initiative in our state. Clean energy is major, okay? And that's why we cover it on this show. That's the deal. What do you think, Sharon?
I think that's great. That's why we're here every Wednesday from 4 to 5, and we hope you all join us so we can hear people like Jim coming on our show and co-host Ray Starling from Hawaii Energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here today. You've seen this. You heard what she said. What do you think?
I think it's a tremendous opportunity for people to come together and talk about the issues. Oftentimes, there isn't a good forum to bring these key issues out into the public, and this is a tremendous way to go about it. And the activity of this show is essential to keep talking about energy, because as you said, it's such an essential part of our lives that we need to pay attention to it, and we need to think about the future.
Okay, Ray, your turn.
Well, this is a special time in the history of Hawaii where we're making some pretty radical changes in the way we use energy and generate energy. And this show is the one place you can count on coming to every Wednesday and hearing something about the latest issues that are on the table, being discussed, that will affect us all going forward. So come join us, and if you have some ideas you want to share with us about energy, give us a call and let us know. We'll put you up here and let you talk for an hour. So come see us.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Jim. It's great to be, from Think Tech's point of view, it's great to have this show. We love the show. It's our most important show. So come around and listen to us 4 to 5 on Wednesday. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, we're back with Sustainable Hawaii talking about how to solve the EV vehicle charging dilemma with Margaret Larson from DBED. Margaret's with the Energy Office, and we were just talking about some solutions with DAGs, was it? And tell us what are you working on?
Well, we were in discussions with DAGs this past legislative session to see how we can encourage the spirit of the law to kind of remain, in terms of we really want to encourage more EV adoption. And one of the main incentives for EV drivers when they're purchasing a vehicle is knowing that they'll be able to get some free parking here and there, and being able to access that HOV lane. So we want to make sure that we keep that law so we can further EV adoption. However, we also want to be respectful to our county and state and entities that need to enforce that law as well and make it a little easier for them.
And I would imagine that one of the issues is just having the manpower to oversee the sites, but aren't most of the municipal and state sites contracted by parking companies, or do they actually have?
I think some are, yeah,
So
yeah.
I would think
say
there's
that.
a mechanism there then in the contracting in which they could require oversight of,
Right,
of
right.
making people complicit to the law.
Right, yep, that's one option. Other options would be maybe you can't move to the next stall, meaning like you have to move 600 feet or something like that, but that even make it cumbersome.
Right,
So I think in the time being, I'm hoping that we could just keep the spirit of the law and see where we're at in 2020.
Well, the third thing that I find often is that you have a non-EV parked in the EV parking stall, and they also can be there all day because they know they're not going to get charged for parking.
Yeah,
so that's
sure.
a double violation.
Sure.
What can we do about that?
Yeah, well, you know, I full disclosure, drive a internal combustion vehicle, although I do own only one car for my family and I carpool. However, I do see those open stalls on occasion, and it's so tempting to park in them, but I haven't because that's against my religion. However, there is a law that says that you can't, you know, I feel like I'm not going to park there because I'm managing the EV program, and that would be horrible. But I also know that I could potentially be fined. I think it's like 50 to, I'm not sure if it goes up to 100, but it's definitely around the $50 range, where there is a law on the books that says if you're a gas car and you're caught parking in that EV stall that's marked as an EV stall, that the police enforcement or whatnot can fine you. And I have followed up with the Honolulu Police Department or whatnot, or ticket enforcements, to see if they in fact have that on their, if they can write that ticket, and they have it. I don't know how often they do, but I'd imagine to have EV drivers encourage the site host or the property manager to kind of continue to enforce that, because I'd imagine it's a phone call. I'm not sure really how that's enforced, but I do know there's a state law that
Well, maybe it would be
could be
helpful
subject to that.
to put up on your website that law.
We have
So-
it on there.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So
Good.
our website is electricvehicle.hawaii.gov, and there's laws. There's a link for laws, and then
Okay,
laws
so
and
those of
incentives.
us who want to help along
Sure.
enforcement of the law
Sure.
could go there, cite that law, and make the parking security people at least
Aware. Sure.
of the law. What is the likelihood that they might follow up and enforce it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that you provide that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that you've been working on, I know, is Act 164. The Electric Vehicle Working Group was required by the legislature, and you just submitted a report in November. Can you tell us what that's about? And
Yeah. So That law was passed in 2015 legislative session here in Hawaii.
And
that,
the law was?
Act 164 that required the department I work for, Department of Business, Economic Development, Tourism, to establish this working group, and that it would be facilitated by the Hawaii State Energy Office. And the working group will look to solving challenges in multi-unit dwellings, such as like condos and apartments and townhomes.
In order to be able to install chargers.
Yeah, exactly. And so there is a law in the books right now that says if you are owner of an EV and you reside in a condo or townhome or multi-unit dwelling, that your association can't deny you from installing a charging station. However, that law kind of stops there in some ways and leaves a lot open in terms of who covers that cost and how is that covered, and et cetera, et cetera. And it always comes down to the bottom line. And there are some challenges when it comes to multi-unit dwellings here, but also like internationally or nationally. It's one of the larger issues when it comes to where you install charging stations. And
I imagine one of the issues is the cost of the charging station itself, and then we can talk about the myriad of other issues. But
Sure.
What is the range of cost for putting a charging unit on a multi-unit dwelling?
Yeah, well, it really is a case-by-case situation in terms of, I don't know if you want to go into some of the
Yeah.
slides that I have.
Let's do that.
So I can.
Hopefully some of our viewers are out there and wanting to do this,
Yeah.
to take up the gauntlet.
One of the cool things about that report, so the working group met for a few months and we worked through all of the different challenges of putting in charging stations in condos, and then try to come up with some solutions to offer to the legislature to consider. And while I helped to provide a lot of the research for that working group, and while I was doing so, there were some reports that kind of listed the challenges or whatnot, but I kind of piecemealed them from different reports, and I feel like we've did a really good job in our report to kind of condense it all, to really laying out the challenges, and we created a flow chart that just kind of outlined some of those.
Terrific. Let's see that flow chart.
Sure.
What are you talking about? I didn't receive any photos for today.
Okay, so I guess we're not going to see those charts.
Oh, okay. I can kind of walk you through it. It's no problem. So I get a lot of phone calls from EV drivers who are just really excited and they just purchased an EV and they want to put in a charging station. What do they do next? Or they've already gone to their condo board. Maybe they've gone to their condo board and they say, oh, and then they call me and be like, oh man, it's been 2 months or 3 months and they still haven't given me an answer. And so sometimes one of the main challenges is the condo board only meets monthly and maybe they need quorum, and so that's some lag time that can frustrate drivers. If the driver is successful or the board is progressive and saying, yeah, let's, we're committed to this project, let's move on, then the next step would be maybe to get an electrical contractor and to figure out how much it's going to cost and or if it's doable. So the first thing would be to determine where you would want to put the charging station. So oftentimes as an EV driver, you're going to want it right in your stall, all for yourself. That may not always be the most cost-effective solution, but if we use that option, I can kind of mention another option in terms of where you might want to place a charging station.
Well, it's important for viewers to know that you can have a very long cord, so the actual charger itself does not have to be right at your stall.
It's true. You could put, so the main thing is that you really want to put that charging station close to the electrical source.
Right.
Because the longer you have to trench or pull that cord, it's going to be more costly. Now you could plug in and run it all the way to somewhere, but if you're going to run it all the way, if you're saying like you don't have to be so close up, you don't want a tripping hazard and safety issues. So you're going to want an electrical contractor to install one. There's a few different levels of charging too. I'm kind of going all over the place, but there's level 1, which is your 110 outlet, 120 volt, whatnot. And that's a slower charge depending on your vehicle and if it's a second car or whatnot. You can get a lot of people, I've heard, have been choosing just to go plug right into the wall.
Right, that's a very small trickle charge.
It is, yeah.
And what I've found with our own home is that we actually are about 6-8 feet from the outlet, and an 8-foot cord is easy. but we also have gone to other people's homes and used our mobile charger. And it really, you can run it along the base of a wall or whatever. But in terms of the way you can do it at the multi-unit dwelling is similar to the way you see it in some of the commercial lots. You can have one charger and 3 or 4 outlets going in the 4 directions.
I think what's best for the multi-unit dwellings is a shared use charger or a community charger or whatnot. It's just going to be cheaper. Rather than punching holes. So if I want an EV and I put one in my stall and then, you want an EV and you put one, it's really just not financially sustainable to continue to punch holes all over. So what a lot of condos are doing is finding a common area charger where they can install. And from there, you would need to determine if you have enough transformer space to even add in that station, and you're most likely going to be putting in what they consider a level 2 charging station, which is similar to your dryer outlet in terms of usage. And
that's a very important point to make, so that people understand what is the electrical usage. And we didn't mention that in the charging stations, where, like at the Capitol, where you swipe your card, it is a very low cost. For a 2-hour charge is usually about $2. So that's important to know. So how much electricity are we using when we plug in our electric vehicle overnight at our home outlet, which tends to be the same outlet as an electric dryer?
That one's like 240 volt.
Right.
Yeah. And on our website, I have kind of a breakdown of all of the numbers if we want to get into them.
But it's only a few dollars is the important point, is that when you're charging your vehicle, it's not the same amount by any long shot as the amount you're paying for gasoline. So a lot of people are concerned, and particularly I notice when we go to someone's house and I'm made 3 or 4 trips and I'm going to be there all evening, I might need to bump it up 10 or 15% to make it home. And I've noticed some people are a little concerned about me plugging in at their home. I might be using $1 of electricity.
I think we have facts and figures on our website, and we did a little bit of a back of the envelope calculations at looking at how far you can, or how much would 25 miles cost, and kind of looking at where we're at today with our gas prices and electricity prices. It's about $2 or under $2 per that 25 miles. But I was looking back from a year ago, and it definitely jumps up. So it really fluctuations depend on the cost of electricity and the cost of oil and gasoline and whatnot when comparing it.
Of course, if you're like us and you have basically net zero metering at your house, or even if you have any photovoltaic to assist with your electricity production, then that cost is going way down.
Yeah, that definitely helps.
That's very important to know.
For sure.
So some of the other issues for the multi-unit dwelling folks are, I know you said from an organizational standpoint. So you've got to have a quorum of the association. You have to have an agreement as to where to site it. You have to agree on putting some funds into having an electric contractor come out and do an estimate, a consultation as to where that would go.
Yep, perfect.
Once you've done all that, and then you usually would get advice from that electrical contractor as to what kind of a charging station to put in, or from your electric vehicle distributor.
Yep.
What are the ranges of the cost of that actual charging station?
The actual station or the installation? Because those are totally two different prices.
Let's do both.
Okay. So we don't have the slides, is that right?
We have apparently no slides.
Okay, no worries. If I could, I just want to make sure that I give an accurate number. And these are all
let's go for a break.
Okay.
And I'll let you take a look at that.
Okay,
and
perfect.
We'll be right back with Margaret solving the EV dilemma.
Hello, I'm Stephen Katz, and I'm the host of Shrink Wrap, which comes to you live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, and then it's repeated again whenever you want if you go to the website. On our show, we will be talking to all different kinds of therapists, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, people who talk about the mind, the brain, and about different ways to find happiness. I myself am a marriage and family therapist in practice here in Hawaii, and I hope you will join us because I've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to learn, and it's a great ride. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on Think Tech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
Have like load.
Hi, we're back with Sustainable Hawaii and Margaret Larson from the Hawaii Energy Office, helping us to determine what it takes to get some chargers in our condo units and other multi-unit dwellings.
Yep.
And we were just about to talk about what some of those costs might be.
Yeah, thank you. So I was mentioning that it's really a case-by-case situation in terms of the type of charger that you may want and the bells and whistles. So for instance, if you've decided to put it as a common area charger where multiple EV drivers may be wanting to use it, so you may want to consider having the ability to do reservations or the ability to do credit card swipe, where that billing challenge may be resolved by individual users using their credit card.
So depending on the level of sophistication of the software, that really would affect the price of the charging station.
Yeah, exactly. You could get kind of like a dumb charger where it's just something up on the wall, which could work, but then it may get tricky when you want to start calculating different usage or whatnot.
Yeah, in other words, in a multi-unit dwelling, people are going to want to have a direct payment for their charge.
Most likely, yeah.
And then there's the issue, I would imagine, of who's paying for the charger itself and the installation. Have you heard in your research of a lot of reticence on the part of the condo members to spread that cost across all units?
I have heard of creative mechanisms. However, I think it's still a new option here, or something that condos are just now considering here in Hawaii because of the challenges. So I think they're trying to figure out what's the best way of doing that. I know that there has been some resistance of spreading it out, knowing that only a selective few would be able to use it. That's an interesting debate when you consider swimming pools or saunas that people might not use either. But regardless, we had in the working group discussed those points and really just wanted to kind of shed some light on what the costs would be and what some of the challenges and solutions would be so they can make more informed decisions going forward. So just getting back to some of those costs, the actual machine charging station would cost anywhere from like $500 up to like $7,000 or more. All the numbers kind of fluctuate. And that's just for the hardware itself. And that number really fluctuates depending on what kind of bells and whistles you want. And then the actual installation considerations is around $6,000 to $8,000. But when we chatted with contractors, they said it could be on the low side of like $4,000, and it could go up to $25,000 or $100,000. Those numbers are pretty high and a little bit startling, but you get those numbers when you need to upgrade a transformer. And so in our flow chart, we showed like these big red X's of like, oh, this is just really not going to work. And I think a lot of the older condos here have found that even if they wanted to put in a charging station, oftentimes their transformer doesn't have the capacity to do so. And something we chatted about in the working group are options to maybe utilize energy efficiency measures to lighten that load, so then you could have space to put in a charging station. For instance, more efficient lighting. And that was something that we are starting.
So there is a way for that transformer to be made appropriate if they lighten the load.
There could be. We're having that discussion.
It's not that an archaic transformer automatically would not be able to support an EV charger?
I mean, if you're maxed out, you're maxed out. But I think what we had seen from one electrical contractor is that they were attempting to install a charging station or multiple stations, and the transformer really had no capacity. And this particular contractor had done some research and found that most condos and townhomes can really only have capacity for 6 charging stations. And that's the max, but I think that really varies depending on the age of your condo. And so what he had done was a complete retrofit of lighting and I think a more efficient water heat pumps and whatnot, and found that extra space to put in the charging
Well,
stations.
that's terrific.
Yep, so
That
it's an
takes quite a bit
interesting-
of ingenuity and innovation, but maybe we have some motivated condo
Yeah.
members who might initiate that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering though, are there any plans with the state to make it mandatory for new condo units to make chargers part of their regular established amenities?
Yeah, that's a really great point, and something that would be worth looking at. And we did discuss it in the working group of going down that road of looking at building codes. For the working group, they really wanted to focus more on the task that was presented to them in terms of how do you solve the issue of current condos, existing condos, and existing EV drivers, and how do we solve that issue right now. But they did point that building codes may need to be looked at. We wanted to see if the new constructions, if developers were kind of following suit with market trends. And so I think we would kind of need to do a little bit of a survey to understand if they in fact are developing condos right now with the absence of building codes. But we have seen jurisdictions on the mainland that are in fact incorporating building codes or electric vehicle charging stations and building codes. And I had heard from our building code guru in the energy office, Howard Wigg, that the national codes were looking to incorporate them, I think, in a future year. So
That'd
it's
be
definitely an
exciting.
area of topic, but then that kind of starts begging the question of how many do you plan for? Because one really isn't enough, I think. If you're gonna go through the challenges of wiring and the cost and whatnot, then you really would want to at least plan for multiple, especially as we want to
Absolutely.
encourage more EVs.
Right.
So you might not need to hang that charging station hardware up on the wall, but at least you'd want to make sure that your transformer would have capacity specifically for charging stations, or
So you're
put in that
charging station
conduit or
ready.
whatnot, so you're ready. Exactly.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I was recently at the Building Industry Association, their annual expo, and there were 2 charging station companies there.
Oh, cool.
And so it'd be interesting to know from the BIA, are they tracking this, and is this a trend? I would absolutely hope so, and I would think that it would not be a very high cost if you're making it charging station ready.
It's definitely
from
cheaper,
the get-go.
for sure.
It would be,
Yeah.
and it would certainly be an attraction
Yes.
to making that
Yes.
condo unit
Yes.
more marketable, particularly in Hawaii.
For sure.
And I'm wondering, we've been talking about this. One of the things I'm always sensitive to is making sure we're including neighbor islands. Is this going to be a trend on the neighbor islands as well? Are you looking for the Act 164? Did you also survey neighbor island condo associations and units? Or is this very centered on Honolulu?
No, the working group definitely was statewide, and the
Terrific.
legislators on the working group made sure to remind us. Sometimes we would get a little bit more Oahu-centric in our discussions because it's kind of the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
But it definitely was a statewide approach and a statewide consideration of some areas have less condos, some it's not so much of a problem. Or some condos in certain areas of the state are super old, or they don't. So it's definitely a consideration. Something else the working group looked at is maybe where would be an alternative location to the condo that may work a little bit easier.
Is there any consideration also in the long run for future planning for Hawaii to make some charging stations in residential areas? One of the things that's very difficult for even single dwelling unit owners is that they're not set up with either a driveway or a carport or a garage. So plugging in their EV means crossing a sidewalk or some other public conveyance. So I just can imagine that there are EV charging stations at parks or community-centric areas where people could pull in and charge. Has that ever been thought of?
Yeah. The charging station challenge is really tricky, and I think that's one of the main barriers to EV adoption is those specific cases of where you really doesn't make sense or it's really difficult to put in a charging station. And then it's like the cost of the EV sometimes discourages people from purchasing as well. And I think as batteries become more improved in terms of the capacity and the range or whatnot, there'll be more EV adoption. But the thought of putting them in community centers or whatnot I think is a good one. We do have a requirement that looks at large parking lots that have over 100 stalls are required to put in a charging station. And as a current law right now, it does include those type of facilities.
That's interesting though. One charging station per 100 stalls.
No, not per 100. So if you have 100 stalls, you need to put in one. So
Okay,
if you have
that's even
500,
worse.
right? So if you have 500, you still need to put in one. The challenge, just going
so-
back to like the parks and whatnot, the challenge with those locations is sometimes there's not electricity in terms of your 240 volt.
Right.
And so that's where that better planning comes in, and where are sustainable locations that, you know, costly, like pencil out, or that are going to be safe or whatnot when you're going to be charged or charging up at whatever's time. I think that's why or Hawaiian Electric has really picked up the ball in many ways and helped to put in fast charging, and they're looking at site hosts, and
That's
fast charging
terrific.
really does make sense, and they're looking for a location that already have that power, so you don't need to upgrade, or they may be subsidizing some of that upgrade cost.
Well, as we come to the close in our show, is there potential out there to require public parking areas to put in more than one charger if they have 100 stalls or more? Because that ratio isn't a good one.
Yeah, well, every year bills come into the legislature looking at kind of creative ways to amend that legislation. And I would encourage anyone who's interested in kind of participating in that process to do so, and maybe work with our office during the off season. Maybe we can come up with some good language. I think it really comes down to planning and consideration of cost, and really trying to figure out where may be the best locations for charging stations. We're starting to look a lot deeper at workplace charging to utilize where people maybe park during the day, and also be able to take advantage of renewable energy such as solar that's available during the day. So that's an area of focus right now for the State Energy Office, really looking at that with some of our partners here, and maybe doing some more surveys of EV drivers to find out where, in fact, are they interested in parking and charging or whatnot, if they can't charge up at the condo or whatnot. And the U.S. Department of Energy has a workplace charging challenge website where they have a lot of great resources. So I'd encourage employers or employees to go check out that website for resources.
Do you know what the website is? U.S. Department of Energy.
Workplace charging challenge. If you just Google that, it comes
Okay.
right up.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And certainly that would be a tremendous assistance to the utility if for evening the load from intermittent renewable energy, if we had people charging during the workday.
Yep.
When there's solar and an ability to take advantage of that would bring down the cost to all of us.
Yeah.
For the electricity. Just a last question very quickly is when the Hawaiian Electric quick charging stations are up, are they trying to locate those where there's a renewable source of energy?
I don't know that they're actually building solar next to them, but they are part of a pilot program that looks at demand response and battery storage. So the one that they just installed, I think, has an option to kind of take that the energy and kind of store it, and so you're only really using a certain amount of energy, but the vehicle is getting a lot
So
more.
they're looking at
they
some
are
really
looking at
innovative
unique ideas.
solutions.
Exactly.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, we have to come to a close.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Margaret. This has
Thank
been
you.
really illuminating, and we look forward to having you back.
Great. Thanks very much for having me.
Aloha.
Aloha.